Hello, I'm Logan.
And I'm Lexi.
And this is Pride and Prejudice, the podcast talking all things Pride, but mainly we're talking about the T in LGBT. So I'm Logan Rebello. I'm a relief consultant at Dimensions, part of the Dimensions marketing team, winner of the 2018 Autism Leaders List for Work in Education. I'm also autistic and got 2 letters in the LGBT alphabet. So I am both trans masculine, and I am also bisexual.
I'm Lexi Carter. I'm a filmmaker and writer. I'm also autistic. And I am also transgender, non-binary trans woman, and I'm asexual as well.
Episode 1, the T in LGBT. We talk in all things trans today. So in this episode we're going to cover our personal experiences, what it means to be trans, as well as some terminology. We're also going to be talking about the different flags and how the progress flag came to be. So for anyone who doesn't know the letters, not going to go through all of them because there's millions, but just the main few. L stands for lesbian, G stands for gay, B is bisexual, T is trans. The Q kind of differs depending on who you're talking to. Some people say it stands for questioning, so people questioning their gender identity or their sexuality. But for other people it means queer, the sort of umbrella term. For the other letters, the IA, that's intersex, is I. A is asexual.
Like me.
And if you want to know the other letters, look them up, because if we covered them all in this episode, it would probably be too long.
Yeah, there's often pansexuals used as well, and in North American communities you'll see 2S for two-spirit, but that's kind of very specific to some indigenous groups.
So I've been openly trans for I think 4 years now, or 3 years. About that many years, but I have sort of always known that I am trans, but I just didn't have the terminology to understand what I was feeling, which is why I think it's important that we learn LGBT subjects in schools, because there's a lot of children struggling with a lot of different feelings that they might not have the right words to, and having those answers earlier on might help solve things in the future, make things easier to understand. So I am a trans man, and what that basically means is I was born into the female sex, identified female as birth, but I really am and always have been male. My gender is male, my sex is female, but we will talk about sex characteristics later and sort of what that means.
So I guess I've been openly trans for kind of 12 years, at least to family, a bit longer for some people, but I was kind of aware since I was a kid as well.
How I found out that I was trans, essentially, was because I always knew something was different. As I said earlier, I didn't know the right terminology. But essentially, my friend came out as trans masc when I was in secondary school, would have been around 15 at this time. And he came out as trans, and I had no idea what that meant. He came in with a haircut, and I thought, oh cool, he's a tomboy. But then he started explaining it to me, and I was like, wait, that's a thing? That's a thing you can do? Oh my god. And then I was like, talking to my other friends, like, oh, surely you wished you were a boy when you were growing up? And they were like, no. And then I had a lot of questions. I was like, oh boy. And that's a difficult thing, because sometimes you think, oh, I wish I didn't have these questions now, because now I'm questioning things. But, sometimes you do need to ask yourself those questions, because once you sort of find out, it is life-changing and scary, and understandably so. But also, I started feeling better as well, because I was like, that's why I felt this way, and that's what, oh, it all makes sense now, and I can be me, and it makes sense. It is a thing. Someone else is feeling the same way that I was, so it is a valid thing. But I didn't come out until years later, because one, out of fear. Being trans isn't really accepted among society, and I kind of have a habit of reading negative comments online, which is not a healthy thing to do, and I shouldn't do that, but I do it anyway because I'm just weird like that. But also, I didn't have the most accepting stepdad in the world, and it's kind of difficult to come out in those circumstances. So I came out officially a few years later, and I was allowed to be myself, change my name, change my wardrobe. It was a big, scary journey, but I wouldn't have had it any other way, knowing where I am today.
I originally intended to come out to my mum when I was about 12 or 13, I think, but it took me a few more years. But I'm non-binary as well, so that's a little bit... I mean, some non-binary people don't want to be class themselves under the trans umbrella, but it's kind of is in a way if you're identifying as a gender that's different from your sex assigned at birth. But for me, there wasn't really any terminology accessible to me at the time, so I kind of didn't really know how to describe it. But to make things more complicated, I guess I identify as a woman as well, so it's kind of like, but like at least 75%, and the rest is just nothing, I guess. That, but yeah, growing up, it was sort of like I was pretty aware from a relatively young age. I don't know how, but just kind of about transition, things like that. So I wanted to pursue that, but I was pretty scared, nervous around that, and I was bullied a lot at school, so I kind of didn't want even more of that, although looking back it probably wouldn't have been any different. But I came out to some friends in my early teens, and then to my mum when I was 18. And it's still been a journey since then, definitely.
So, terminology. We've both mentioned that we both knew that we were trans from a young age, but didn't have the terminology for it. So what does that mean? What has it been called in the past? So queer is a term that's kind of controversial because it was initially a slur that has now been claimed back. What are your thoughts on the term queer?
So I like to use queer as an umbrella term, partly because it's a bit more snappy than LGBTQ, whatever. You can use that as well, but I know some people will still associate it as being an older slur, but it's kind of like you can say you're queer without having to explain all the intricacies, or even if you don't want to identify with particular labels, but you're somewhere around there, then it kind of works. It works for me because I'm like 3 different things on the alphabet anyway.
I think it's just important to respect what each person uses individually. If they're uncomfortable with the term queer, just don't use it around them. I don't really see an issue with that. So another common term, transsexual, believe it was popular as a term around the 60s and 70s, maybe closer to the 70s. You might need to correct me on that.
Yeah, it started falling out of use in the 90s. But I mean, even when I was a kid, it was kind of the first term that I learned, and it was sort of, it made sense to me, but it didn't quite sound right for me at the same time.
I don't like the term personally because being trans has nothing to do with your sexuality. You know, in my case, I'm trans and bisexual. You know, the same with just everyone. Like, your gender doesn't really correlate with who you like. Your gender is like who you are, and who you like is who you like. So I don't like it personally. I think the reason it came out was because people just associated people being trans as a sexual thing, potentially a sexual fetish. I don't think Rocky Horror Picture Show helped with that, if I'm honest. And I think it's sort of a word created by people who are outside of our people. You know, this is how they explain it.
Yeah, it was initially more of a medical term, so it was kind of like, you know, moving from one sex to another, which you can say is still accurate maybe, but a lot of people like to use transgender now, or just trans, which will cover both of them.
The terminology is still kind of a bit wobbly nowadays. A lot of people don't know what to use. I find this particularly difficult on medical forms. I'm sure everyone's filled this out once in a while, you know, applying for a doctor's surgery or whatever, and it says, what is your gender? And recently it's kind of changed to be male, female, other, or additional options outside of that. But the one that really annoys me is male, female, transgender. That doesn't make any sense. I am a male transgender person. I am both of those things. Like, saying that is equivalent, like, transgender is an adjective. It's like saying tall person, person with brown hair. You can be a woman with brown hair, but you're still a woman. Same as being trans, you are a trans woman. It is an adjective. It's not a separate thing. You know, like, some people may prefer to just identify as transgender, and that's fine. But for me, it doesn't make any sense to have that as a separate option on the form. I think probably the best way to go about it is just to say male, female, other. And if it's relevant to whatever form you're filling out, maybe specifically stating, oh, trans man or non-binary person, or however you want to identify. But just for most forms, I think male, female, other kind of covers it.
Yeah, so if you really want to get kind of into the detail of it, you could say cisgender female, cisgender male, which is basically just the opposite of transgender. It's literally as simple as that. So it's what the majority of the human population is, really.
Yeah, where the words originated from is cis means on the same side of, and trans means on the opposite side of. You know, we use cis and trans in other words, you know, transport. So I think this brings us on to another point, and that is the term cisgender. Contrary to what Elon Musk wants you to believe, cis is not a slur. It is simply a term to describe someone who isn't transgender. You know, same way as saying you being straight means you're not any of the other letters in the... Well, okay, actually, you could be the other letters. Saying that you're straight means that you are not gay or bisexual or any of the other sexualities. You are straight. We don't say normal, we say straight. You know, same as, you know, because people get triggered. They're like, oh, I'm not a cis woman, I am a woman. Yeah, you are a woman. Same as a trans woman is a woman. We still say trans woman.
It's just a descriptor, really, and it could be useful in some circumstances because then you know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I think where people get confused is that you don't have to use that phrase in every sentence. It's only used when relevant. You know, call yourself a woman. That's fine. Trans people, call yourself a woman. That's also fine, you know. But when it's relevant for whatever reason, then you start specifying trans woman, cis woman. You know, we're not trying to change language, even though language changes all the time. That's just essentially what the words are. So because there is a lot of sort of old terminology that's coming to be more well known, or in some cases new terminology, a lot of people get a bit worried, oh, I don't know how to refer to this person, or what if I say the wrong thing? That's completely fine to have that anxiety and to not know how to refer to someone, but no reasonable trans person is going to get offended if you ask them how to refer to them. You know, what I usually do is I just say they, them until they confirm to me what their pronouns are, which everyone has. Everyone has pronouns. It comes with the English language.
And most other languages.
Yes, and most other languages. So if you're unsure, just ask them. There's absolutely nothing wrong with asking someone how to refer to them or how they wish to be referred to. So I think this podcast is important. I mean, we kind of started it because it's June, it's Pride Month, so it's relevant, yay. But also Pride, you know, it's all year. People are gay all year round. So if you are listening to this because you want to help support someone you love, or perhaps you're questioning your own identity, that's great. I think it's really cool that you want to look up more research into things. But do be aware this is mainly our personal experiences, and everyone is different, of course. And also feel free to do your own research. There's some great stuff on the internet. Although do be careful where you look. You know, Twitter's not the best place. And I'm calling it Twitter, not X, because Elon Musk refuses to call his child by the correct name. So for specifically, if you're looking at trans support, there is a book by Jamie Raines called The T in LGBT, which talks about all things trans. He also has a YouTube channel, which helped me a lot in the earlier days. Although he is trans masculine, so he will mainly talk about being trans masculine. For a trans woman, there is Samantha Lux on YouTube.
So, despite what the media may have you believe, historically trans people have been left out of a lot of conversations around LGBT equality, with those conversations mostly focusing on the L, G and sometimes B. But you may have seen kind of newer versions of the Rainbow Pride flag with some extra colours. That would be the Progress Pride flag that was created by non-binary artist Daniel Quasar. And it has some additional colours in an arrow shape to highlight underrepresented groups in the queer umbrella, including trans people and black and brown people, and intersex, which is not the same as being transgender, but a lot of intersex people are trans. That's often included in the wider LGBTQIA plus umbrella. And the intersex inclusive pride flag was created by Valentino Facchietti to incorporate the intersex flag into this. It's a yellow flag with a purple circle. So if you see a flag with all of these different colours, it's just to kind of include people who haven't necessarily been included as well in the past.
I've heard some sort of controversies with the Progress flag. Quite a lot of them coming from good intentions and just not quite understanding why it exists. Saying like, oh, why are black and brown people included? Your race isn't anything to do with your sexual or gender identity. Oh, why is the trans flag there? That's a separate flag. Oh, why are we adding intersex people now? Basically, like, people are saying, oh, you can't include everyone in one flag. I thought that's what the rainbow was for, because the rainbow is already a massive spectrum. The problem is, unfortunately, even in our own community, there can be some prejudice against certain groups of people. For a time, and this probably still is a thing, bisexual people weren't welcomed in the space. Same with trans people, and unfortunately people of other races, black and brown people, there has been some racism in the community as well. So basically what the flag is standing for is saying, these people are in our community, deal with it, essentially. And, personally, I think the Progress flag is too many colours. That's just because I'm autistic. I don't like the amount of different clashing colours in it. But I understand why it's there, and I do think it's important. If you want to use the rainbow flag, it still exists. Use the rainbow flag if you want. Just don't try and get rid of the Progress flag.
Thanks for listening to the Pride and Prejudice podcast.
And be sure to check out the other episodes.
Bye.
Bye.